All right, so we talked about carbs, we talked about protein, we talked about fats, and a little bit about alcohol. So let's dive into it about all of it together. So you should have this sheet. If you don't have this sheet, talk to your trainer. But if we're talking about our protein, if we're getting 6 ounces of chicken, or if we're getting 6 ounces of bison or anything like that, that's going to be about 30 grams of protein, give or take. Now, this is for the average person. I want to say 150 to 200 pounds. We have other sheets and we have other resources that we can talk about if you are heavier. But if we are thinking about protein first, protein is the number one thing that we want to think about because it's the hardest thing to get into our diet. So we want that chicken, we want that lean ground beef. We can do eggs and egg whites. We always want to have some sort of that yolk in there with some egg whites. I really like cottage cheese. So thinking about that protein, getting around 30 grams per per meal. So we have our breakfast, we have our snacks, we have our lunch, and our dinner. So next thing that we want to think about is going to be our fats. So with protein, you think about the palm. With fats, we want to think about your thumb. That's what we're cooking with. So we have either peanut butter, we have almond butter, we have coconut oil. We can do grass-fed butter. You can do avocado oil, but you just want to make sure that we're staying away from the vegetable oil and canola oil. Not a whole lot that we really have to think about with fats. Then we have our carbs. I really like sweet potatoes because sweet potatoes are going to be a lower glycemic index. So we're not going to have these big spikes. You can always do sweet potatoes. You can do mashed potatoes, regular potatoes. You could do rice. Any sort of legumes or nuts, they're going to be higher in calories. So just keep that in mind. They're going to have those fats in there. And then if we're thinking about pasta, if we're doing any sort of pasta, I want you to think about a nice pasta salad at a barbecue instead of a big pasta potluck um, for a sporting event. And then with our vegetables, we want, I don't necessarily want you to stay away from peas, carrots, corn, eggplant, squash, pumpkin, beets. Those are just going to be starchy. So we have to think of those more as a carb than they are the vegetable themselves. And then when we think of berries or any sort of fruit, they kind of go hand in hand like those starchy vegetables. With the vegetables, we kind of want to think about things that are going to be green and leafy. Spinach, kale, broccoli, Brussels sprouts. Those are going to be good options. You can always do peppers, mushrooms, onions, also good options. So when we put it all together, we want to stick with that protein. So for breakfast, we could do a egg white omelet. So we throw some spinach in there, some tomatoes, whatever else we want. So then we have the vegetable with that, and then we have a protein source. We're good to go. We need a little bit of carbs. We can throw in an apple. We can throw in some hash browns, whatever you want. Now we take a breath. We want to think about our snacks. I think peaches are a great option when you pair them with a protein source. So cottage cheese. So, and you can make that on wish you. You can create whatever you need just to make sure that you're staying on track. So if we think about our carbs and our proteins, that's 4 calories per gram. Fats are going to be 9 calories per gram. And then alcohol is 7 calories per gram. It's like a really dense carb that has to be broken down first before we break down your own fats or even using those carbs for energy. What I usually recommend to people is a 40-30-30 split. So 40% carbs, 30% protein, and 30% fat. What I personally do, not what I usually recommend, is a 35-35-30 split. So 35% carbs, 35% protein, and 30% fat. When I do that, if I have a day where I am going to be a little bit more energized or need more energy, where I'm playing hockey or going on a big hike or snowboarding or something like that, I get a little bit more carbs in there to make sure that my energy is replenished. That carb cycling can be harder for a lot of people, so we just stay with that 40, 30, 30. You'll get those results that you're looking for. If we're going to go that route, and let's just say we need an average of 2,000 calories per day, you're going to need 200 grams of carbs. 200 grams. That's going to be 800 calories. Okay. If we're going just based off of this, you need 150 grams of protein. That's going to be 600 calories. And then if we're going to fats, that's 600 calories as well, but we only need 66 grams. So that's based off the 40, 30, 30 split. This next part, this last part that I have written down, fiber is most underutilized in the US. So only about 9 to 10 grams is the average fiber intake for Americans. We want to get closer to 20 grams to 30 grams. How we do that? We can get fresh veggies, fresh fruit. We can even get in whole grains. So instead of doing like white bread, we go into wheat bread, things like that to really hammer in uh, getting as much fiber as we possibly can. I just now had, instead of white rice, I had wild rice. Plenty of fiber in there, and we want to make sure that that's all squared away. Now, other things that we can add that aren't going to be too crazy. We can always have mustard, we can do soy sauce, we can always do lemon juice, balsamic, we can do hot sauces. With seasonings, we want to be careful. There can be hidden calories, a lot of sugar in them, but we want to go with some spices, some seasonings, um, dry rubs. Again, we want to be careful. Mrs. Dash is a great option. Flavor Gods is a good option. And then if we're going with drinks, black coffee is only going to be like 50 calories. If you're going with like water, green tea is a good option. Sugar-free iced tea, things like that. Those calories in drinks often add up quite a bit. So you want to reduce getting your intake from calorie wise uh, from drinks. Now, if you need a protein shake, absolutely, you need that protein. Get that in there. But I'm talking more about the pops, the sodas, things like that. I hope this helps. If you guys have other questions, feel free to talk to your trainer, talk to me, so that way we can continue on this process for getting stronger, getting healthier. Now, this is for Gen Pop. I can definitely talk more about athletics and athletic performance because the 40-40-30, the 40-30-30 split is not what I recommend. We will definitely talk about that in another video if you're interested. Thanks, guys.